Hi everyone, it's Grandma again, and today's book is Disney's Winnie the Pooh. This one has a lot of words, so I'm probably going to hold the book up here and let you see all the pictures while I'm reading. One fine autumn day, Winnie the Pooh sat on a log in front of his house in the 100-acre wood. Something seemed to be wrong. Instead of his usual smile, Pooh Bear was wearing a frown, scratching his head. Think, think, think. Whatever can be wrong, said Pooh. He was a bear of little brain, so thinking was sometimes hard for him. Beside him lay 4 of his honey pots, and all of them were empty. That's it. I'm hungry, but I've eaten all of my honey. Oh, bother, sighed Pooh, wandering back inside his house. Noisily pulling more empty jars out of the cupboard, Pooh stuck his paw in one of them. There's a bit left in this one, but hardly enough for a hungry bear like me, he said as he licked off the honey. Just as his tummy began to rumble with hunger, Pooh heard a buzzing sound. Turning around, he saw a bee fly through the window. A bee, thought Pooh Bear. Now what do bees do? They make honey, and the only reason bees make honey is so I can eat it. With a smile on his face, he followed the bee outside and watched it fly up into a tree. Now, if I can just follow that bee, he's bound to lead me to honey, said Winnie the Pooh, as he began to climb the very tall tree. Finally, Pooh reached the spot where the bee had disappeared. But just as he was about to stick his paw into the hole, the branch he was climbing on broke in half, and Pooh began to fall. Oops, ouch, groaned Pooh as he tumbled from branch to branch. Splash! Winnie the Pooh landed in a mud puddle. It all comes of liking honey so much, he sighed as the mud bubbled up around him. Not far away, at the edge of the forest, lived Christopher Robin. He was a good friend to all the animals, always willing to lend a hand. The boy was busy that day helping out poor Eeyore, the donkey, who had lost his tail. Now, Eeyore, I'm going to nail your tail back on. Try not to lose it again, said Christopher Robin as he knelt down behind the donkey. Kanga and Owl stood nearby watching. A bit to the left, suggested Kanga. No, absolutely not, said Owl. Move it to the right. When Christopher Robin had finished, Eeyore gave his tail a mighty swish. Thanks, he said. It's just an old tail, but I'm kind of attached to it. There's Eeyore, Christopher Robin, and Kanga and Owl. Just as the animals and Christopher were congratulating one another, along came Winnie the Pooh. Hello, Pooh Bear. What have you been up to now? Asked Christopher Robin, looking down at his muddy friend. Hello, Christopher Robin. I was just wondering, just thinking about whether you had such a thing as a balloon. Christopher Robin was puzzled. What do you want a balloon for? He asked. Winnie the Pooh looked around and whispered, "Honey." "But you don't get honey with a balloon," Christopher Robin pointed out. "I do," insisted Pooh, as Christopher Robin went to get a balloon. Pooh rolled over and over in another puddle until he was completely covered with mud. Then he took the balloon from Christopher Robin and began floating slowly upward. "I'll be able to reach the bee's nest with this," he explained. "But the bees will see you," shouted Christopher Robin. "Yes, but with all this mud all over me, they'll think I'm a little black rain cloud," laughed Winnie the Pooh as he floated higher and higher. Christopher Robin followed along below as the breezes blew Pooh Bear toward the honey tree. When he drifted close enough to the hole, he reached in and pulled out a paw full of honey. "Yum, yum, nothing like fresh honey," said Pooh, dripping honey everywhere. A swarm of angry bees flew out of the nest and buzzed threateningly around him. "Christopher Robin," shouted Winnie the Pooh, "I think the bees suspect something." "They probably think that you're after their honey," the boy shouted back. By this time, a whole swarm of bees buzzed angrily around Pooh. "Christopher Robin, I have come to the conclusion that these are not the right sort of bees," said Pooh, slapping away the angry insects. "No, not at all a nice sort of bee," he proclaimed as a bee stung his nose. As Pooh perched himself unsteadily on top of the drifting balloon, the swarm of bees suddenly attacked. Soon Pooh heard a loud hissing noise as air began to escape from the balloon. "Christopher Robin," called Winnie the Pooh, "I think I will come down now." "Don't worry, Pooh Bear," said the boy. Christopher Robin ran with outstretched arms and caught Pooh just before he reached the ground. "Silly old bear," laughed the boy. But Winnie the Pooh was not one to give up easily. As soon as his bee stings were better, he had another idea. "Honey rhymes with bunny," thought Pooh. "I think I'll go pay Rabbit a visit." Rabbit was just about to pour himself a cup of tea when Pooh popped his head into the rabbit hole. "Anybody at home?" he shouted. The startled rabbit spilled his tea. "Oh no, not Pooh," he thought in alarm. "He'll eat me out of house and home." But Pooh kept calling, and Rabbit realized he couldn't avoid the hungry bear. "How about lunch?" asked Rabbit. "Thank you, Rabbit. I'm feeling a bit hungry," said Pooh, making himself at home. Rabbit brought out a jar of honey. "Would you like some honey on your bread?" he asked. "Don't bother about the bread. I'll just take a tiny helping of honey," said Winnie the Pooh, tying a napkin around his neck. Rabbit poured out a small helping of honey. Pooh's face fell when he saw the tiny golden dot. "What's wrong?" asked Rabbit. "Well, I did mean a somewhat larger tiny helping," Pooh admitted. Rabbit handed Pooh the jar. "Perhaps you should just help yourself," he said. Winnie the Pooh began eating honey. As soon as he finished one jar, he started on another. He ate and ate and ate until he was nearly covered with honey. Then he turned to Rabbit and said, "Thanks so much. I think I'll be going now." Rabbit looked at Pooh, large tummy, which was now even larger than usual. "You're sure you won't have any more?" Pooh looked around at the empty jars. "Is there any more?" he asked. "No, there isn't," answered Rabbit, shaking Pooh's sticky paw. Licking his paws, Pooh started to leave. Suddenly Rabbit heard a muffled shout. "Help! I'm stuck!" Sure enough, Pooh Bear was wedged into the entrance of Rabbit's house. "That's what happens when you eat too much," he said, giving Pooh a push from behind. "No," replied Pooh. "This is what happens when you make your door too small." Rabbit pushed and Pooh struggled, but he was still stuck. Pooh was wedged into the hole so tightly that he didn't budge an inch. Finally, he began to yell for help. Soon Owl arrived. "Well, if it isn't Winnie the Pooh." "Hello, Owl," replied Pooh. "Are you by any chance stuck?" asked Owl. "Oh no, just resting and thinking, that's all," replied Winnie the Pooh. "Yes, I'd say you were definitely in a tight spot," said Owl, taking a closer look. Back inside his house, Rabbit was staring at Pooh's backside. "Oh dear, oh gracious. If I have to look at that thing for some time, I might as well make the best of it," he muttered. Rabbit placed branches on either side of Pooh's bottom and put a frame around it. "A hunting trophy," he exclaimed, stepping back to admire his work. So silly. That night, Pooh was still wedged in the hole when a gopher stopped by. "I hear there's an excavation problem here. My name's Gopher, and here's my card. What's the problem?" "I'm the problem," sighed Pooh. "I'm stuck in this doorway." Gopher dusted off Pooh Bear and tied a scarf around his head. "Looks as if this may take several days," he said, opening his lunchbox. "Several days," gulped Pooh. "What about meals?" "No, thanks. I brought mine with me," replied Gopher as he began to eat. Later that night, Gopher realized it would be very difficult to unwedge Pooh. Staying only long enough to eat up the last few crumbs of his food, Gopher packed up and left. "Oh, bother," yawned Pooh Bear. "If only I didn't like honey so much, this never would have happened." When Christopher Robin learned of Pooh Bear's predicament, he came running to help. After much thought, the boy decided that the only solution was for Winnie the Pooh to lose weight. "We're going to put you on a diet, Pooh," said Christopher Robin. "And a diet means no honey," he declared firmly. Finally, as Rabbit was beginning to give up on ever using his front door again, Pooh began to budge. Christopher Robin, Kanga, Eeyore tugged on Pooh from outside while Rabbit pushed from the inside. And with a hearty heave-ho, Pooh was free at last. Several days later, as Winnie the Pooh strolled through the 100-acre wood, a great wind lifted him right off his feet. "Oh, goodness, I must have lost a lot of weight. I feel as light as a feather," said the surprised bear. And like a feather, Winnie the Pooh was swept up through the trees. It was a very blustery day, and the wind was blowing harder every minute. As he swirled above the ground, Pooh heard a familiar voice. Looking ahead, he saw his friend Piglet. "Piglet, wait for me!" shouted Pooh as he reached out and grabbed Piglet's scarf. Just then a strong wind separated the two friends as Pooh Bear went flying up toward the tree where Owl lived. Piglet hung onto a branch with all his might. Owl poked his head out of the door. "Nice of you to drop in, Winnie the Pooh," he said. "Oh, and I see you've brought Piglet with you. Well, do come in." As Pooh and Piglet sat in Owl's house, they could feel the house swaying from side to side. Owl in his rocking chair didn't seem to notice. He was too busy telling them a long story about his relatives. "I say, Owl," said Pooh, "this house appears to be moving." "Nonsense," declared Owl. "This house is as solid as a rock. It'll take more than a little breeze to blow it away." Just as Owl said this, an enormous gust of wind blew the roof off. Owl's cupboard doors flew open, and plates and saucers came tumbling out. Before anyone could say a word, Pooh Bear, Piglet, and Owl were all blown out of the house. Pooh found his way home and hopped into his warm, snuggly bed. But the night was filled with strange noises. One of those noises had never been heard before. Pooh, being a bear of very little brain, decided to invite the new sound in. He gathered up all his courage and his pop gun and went to the door. Winnie the Pooh opened the door and peered out cautiously. He couldn't see anything, but then, before he knew what had hit him, a large creature with black stripes bounced on top of him, knocking him over. "Hello, I'm Tigger," said the creature, looking down at Pooh. That's spelled T-I double Gur. Tigger. Double G-er. Tigger. "What's your name?" "My name is Winnie the Pooh." "And you scared me," answered Pooh. "Of course I scared you. Tiggers are supposed to be scary," replied Tigger, who really wasn't scary at all. "The wonderful thing about Tiggers is I'm the only one," Tigger continued. "Then what's that over there?" asked Pooh, pointing toward the mirror. Tigger bounced over to the mirror. "What a funny looking creature," he laughed, seeing his mirror image laughing. Tigger said, "I'll teach that animal to laugh at me." He growled at the mirror. But when the image in the mirror growled back, Tigger became so frightened he bounced right out of Pooh's house. Pooh thought he should stay awake and keep watch for other strange creatures like heffalumps and woozles. But he was so tired he fell asleep. He had a very strange dream about honey and heffalumps and woozles, and as he dreamed, a heavy rain began to fall. The strange dream soon turned into a nightmare. Just as he dreamed he was drowning in honey, Pooh Bear woke up and found himself in a puddle, but not of honey. There was water everywhere. "Oh no, my honey!" yelled Pooh. "I mustn't let the water get into my honey jars." Pooh quickly carried all his precious honey jars to safety up in the big tree above his house. The rain continued to fall, and the 100-acre wood got wetter and wetter until it turned into a huge lake. All the climbing had made Pooh a bit hungry. "I'll just have a little something," he said as he poked his nose into one of the jars. While Pooh was busy eating honey, the water continued to rise all the way up to the branches where he sat. Oh my. A sudden wave of water knocked Pooh over head first into the honey jar. He was quite a sight, with his legs kicking in the air. Floating nearby was Piglet, who was sailing on a kitchen chair. "Is that you, Winnie the Pooh?" shouted Piglet. "It's me, Piglet. Can you hear me?" Winnie the Pooh upside down a honey jar and Piglet. Piglet was too busy trying to get Pooh's attention to notice a waterfall up ahead. Both Pooh and Piglet cried out in alarm, but there was nothing they could do. They plunged down the roaring waterfall, tumbling over and over as they were tossed about by the falling water. When they landed safely in the river below, Pooh was floating on the kitchen chair and Piglet was inside the honey jar. Luckily, Christopher Robin had been looking for his little friends, and he soon had the waterlogged Pooh and Piglet safe on dry land. "You rescued Piglet," Christopher Robin told Pooh. "You're a hero." Once the flood waters had receded, Christopher Robin had a hero party for Pooh. He invited Rabbit, Kanga, and Little Roo, Piglet, Pooh, and even Tigger. Owl made a speech about Pooh's bravery, and everything seemed to be back to normal, at least for the moment. Several weeks later, while Rabbit was picking carrots in his garden, Tigger happened to bounce by. "Oh no," groaned Rabbit when he saw Tigger bouncing into his cabbage patch. With every energetic bounce, Tigger smashed, scattered, and squashed some of Rabbit's favorite vegetables. "Hello, Rabbit," said Tigger. Rabbit looked around at the scattered vegetables. "Tigger, just look at what you've done to my beautiful garden," he shouted, waving his fist. "Yuck, messy, isn't it?" said Tigger, looking around him. "You've ruined it, Tigger. It's your doing. You and your confounded bouncing." "Oh, why don't you ever stop bouncing?" the angry Rabbit demanded. "Bouncing is what Tiggers do best," Tigger answered. So Rabbit turned to Piglet and Winnie the Pooh. "I'm going to teach that Tigger a lesson," he said. "Let's take him for a long walk in the woods and lose him." "Lose him?" asked Pooh. "Oh, we'll find him again the next morning. but it will take the bounce out of 'em," answered Rabbit. The next morning they set off into the forest. As usual, Tigger bounced ahead of everyone. After a while, the three friends managed to lose Tigger, who bounced off into the misty forest. After waiting some time to be sure that Tigger was truly out of sight, Rabbit nudged Pooh and Piglet, and they turned toward home. However, the mist had thickened, and everything looked different than before. "You know, Rabbit," said Pooh Bear, "I don't think we lost Tigger. I think he lost us. Tigger got home before his friends, and so it was that the lesson Rabbit wanted to teach Tigger backfired." When the first snowfall covered the 100-acre wood, little Roo waited anxiously for Tigger to come and take him out to play. "Now, you be careful, dear," said Roo's mother, Kanga, when Tigger arrived, "and bring Roo home in time for his nap," she shouted as Tigger and Roo bounced off into the snow. There's Kanga and Roo. Tigger and Roo reached the frozen pond. "Can you ice skate, Tigger?" asked Roo. "Sure, ice skating is what Tiggers do best," bragged Tigger as he glided across the ice. Soon Tigger was doing figure eights and even skating backward, while Roo cheered him on. Tigger began to make more daring moves. He was so busy showing off, he didn't even see Rabbit in front of him. "Oh no, not you!" screamed Rabbit as Tigger came spinning toward him, out of control. "Look out!" shouted Tigger. "Out of my way! I can't!" as he banged right into Rabbit. "Stop!" Poor Rabbit was sent flying through a snowbank into his own house. "Yuck! Tiggers hate ice skating," said Tigger as he and Roo bounced into the woods. "Can you climb a tree, Tigger?" asked Roo. "Climb a tree? Why, that's what Tiggers do best. Only I don't climb trees, I bounce them." With Roo holding on to his shoulders, Tigger bounced from limb to limb in a tall tree. Higher and higher he bounced until he was as high as he could go. The last bounce was too much for Roo, who fell off his friend's shoulders. On the way down, Roo grabbed onto Tigger's tail and began to swing back and forth. "This is fun!" he shouted. "I've never swung on a Tigger's tail before." "Hey, stop that, please. You're rocking the forest," said Tigger as the tree began to sway dangerously. Roo let go of Tigger's tail and landed on a lower branch. "What's wrong, Tigger?" he asked. "Oh, thank goodness, I was getting seasick," answered Tigger. Just then Pooh and Piglet spotted Tigger. "Hello!" shouted Tigger. "Why, it's Tigger and Roo," said Pooh. "What are you two doing up there?" he shouted. "We bounced up, but now Tigger is stuck," said Roo. Soon Kanga and Rabbit arrived to see what all the shouting was about. Oh dear, exclaimed Kanga. Well, do be careful, Roo, and jump into my apron. I'll catch you. Whee! That was fun, giggled Roo, landing in his mother's apron. Okay, you're next, Pooh and Rabbit shouted to Tigger. Jump! Tigers don't jump, they bounce, said Tigger, holding on tightly to the tree. Then bounce down, said Pooh. Don't be ridiculous, said Tigger. Tigers don't bounce down, they bounce up. Then climb down, shouted Rabbit impatiently. Tigers don't climb down because their tails get in the way, answered Tigger, wrapping his tail around the tree. That settles it, said Rabbit, who was actually enjoying Tigger's predicament. If he won't jump or climb down, he'll have to stay up there forever. Forever? Yelled Tigger. Oh, I promise. If I ever get down from this tree, I will never bounce again. Never. Rabbit was thrilled. Did you hear that, everyone? He asked gleefully. He promised. He said never. The friends decided that the best way to get Tigger down was for him to slide. So slowly and cautiously, with their encouragement, Tigger slid down the tree. You can open your eyes now, you're safe, said Piglet as Tigger reached the bottom of the tree. Tigger was so happy to be back on the ground, he started to kiss the snow. I'm so happy, I feel like bouncing, he said, and he immediately began to bounce. Wait a minute, you promised, Tigger, said Rabbit. Tigger sat down. I did. You mean I can never bounce again? Not even one teeny bounce? Rabbit and the others shook their heads. Tigger sighed and sat on a nearby log. There was a long, sad silence. I like the old bouncy Tigger best, said little Roo. So do we, agreed Kanga and Piglet. Of course we all do, added Winnie the Pooh. Don't you agree, Rabbit? Well, uh, oh, all right, muttered Rabbit with great reluctance. I guess I like the old bouncy Tigger best. Oh boy, said Tigger, bouncing right on top of Rabbit. Come on, I'll teach you all how to bounce. Soon Tigger and all the others, including Rabbit, bounced off into the snowy 100-acre wood together. They are bouncing. And that's the end of that book. I love you all. See you.